All right, let's answer some legal questions.
Yeah.
What's the first question we've got today?
So we've frequently had people reach out to us to ask questions about non-competes.
The guy's saying, all right, is my non-compete still enforceable if I'm fired?
Yeah, absolutely.
The way these things work is you get hired by a company. Day one, you get the agreement, the employment agreement, and these non-compete clauses have to be part of an ancillary agreement, which is the employment agreement. And then the non-compete clause recites certain consideration, and that consideration is typically the trading of confidential information. So if you were fired on day one, did you really get the consideration to make your non-compete enforceable? Yeah, non-competes are pretty rough thing. They're, in New York, by the way, I saw an article that they're thinking about saying, I think it was 200 grand or under, you can't be subject to compete. We do a lot of non-compete work at our firm, and we often represent employees, and those things can absolutely be enforceable. And we've seen them create absolute hardship on families and employees that sign these things. And most of the time, the guy wanted a job or the person wanted a job and wasn't thinking, signed it. What does it mean? And they got into an enforceable non-compete, and that was their livelihood. Okay, what's our next question?
So HOAs, frequently homeowner associations, like to restrict people from operating their properties that they own in the HOA as Airbnbs or short-term rentals.
I've got a friend, okay? He's a buddy of mine. We're a member of this tennis club. We're in the locker room, and he's like, Phil, you got to do something for me. I live in this nice townhome, and my wife and I love it, and we've loved it for many years. But in the last couple of years, we've noticed that it's been rented out by the night on Airbnb and VRBO. And he said, Phil, what happens is these young people, they come in from all over the country, and a lot of them are professional athletes and their entourage. And he says, they go to these clubs on Westheimer, and then they come into my townhome community, and they have these crazy like sex parties, and they're doing drugs, and there's girls walking around in thongs, and the after parties from like 2 a.m. to 6, 7, 8 in the morning. And my wife is just beside me. You got to help me, Phil. And I'm like, all right, let's take a look at the deed restrictions. And sure enough, the townhome community was built like in 2000 and before Airbnb, or I don't know when they're 90 whatever, before Airbnb. And it's got some really generic language in the restrictions that say these townhomes you're not allowed to use for commercial use. You're only allowed to use these for residential use. We're going to have to change the deed restrictions. The problem is, okay, when we change the deed restrictions in Texas, you usually need a 2/3 vote, and it's a cumbersome process. So yes, we can go change the deed restrictions. And then if we do that, we go through that process, then we can specifically say no Airbnb, no VRBO, no short-term rental for less than 30 days. And then we can get rid of all the after parties that are spilling over from Westheimer and Richmond, and his wife can sleep and doesn't have to worry about strippers blowing coke in the driveway. What's our next question?
This couple paid an adoption agency a little over $12,000, and they go through the whole process, but then the mother of the little girl shows up and says that she wants the child back. And so that's a happy story, but the adoption agency does not refund the couple any of their money that they paid.
We have an adoption fraud ring
Exactly.
circulating somewhere in Texas, which is absolutely despicable. It's legal fraud occurring, and it's criminal, by the way. We're not criminal lawyers, we're civil. These people, of course, file a complaint with the district attorney and see if they pick it up. The scheme that you're describing, where the ringleader meets some unsuspecting family that wants to adopt and says, hey, we pay a $10,000 retainer for these adoption services, and we work these hourly rates. And then they get to the very end, and all of a sudden the ringleader calls up and says, oh, I'm so sorry. We were so close, but the birth mother showed up and wants to keep the baby. And the parents, being good people that wanted to go through this adoption, oh, we understand. And yeah, I'm so sorry about your 10 grand. That happened 3 or 4 times until I think people started talking to each other. They started getting wise, and they realized that it was the same birth mother, like showing up or something. That's how they got caught. And then all of a sudden, these parents are just beside themselves. We've been defrauded by this ring, and you've got 4, 5, 6, 7 families that have been defrauded, and maybe they call us, what do we do?
Yeah.
And we have a lot of these sad conversations that says, okay, well, yeah, and they feel wronged. And yes, we can sue them for fraud. What's the first element of fraud?
It needs to be a material misrepresentation.
We've got material misrepresentation, right? It's, I represented I had a child for you to adopt, and there was never a child. What's the second
That
element?
misrepresentation has to be made knowingly or recklessly with knowledge of its falseness.
Absolutely. This was just a complete fraud, knowingly made a fraudulent statement. What's the third element?
The intent of that misrepresentation must have been to induce you to act in a certain way.
Yeah, I wanted to induce you to give me the 10 grand retained.
And then justifiably you act on that misrepresentation that was false, and that causes you injury.
Okay, so the family paid the 10 grand, were defrauded, lost the 10 grand. So you've got this, you've met your elements for civil fraud.
Yes.
You hire us, we go into court, we prove it all up, and then the clients are over there, yeah, we've won. The problem is, now how do we collect? Let's say we get a judgment for the 10 grand plus attorney's fees plus punitives, and you get $100,000-$200,000 judgment, and your client says, where's my money?
Yeah.
We say, the person who defrauded you is actually in prison, been ordered to pay restitution, and they're absolutely penniless. So you've paid us all this money to get you a judgment on paper that's completely worthless. It's just tragic, but you don't want to throw good money after bad money, hiring an attorney to go after a penniless client.
Yeah, I always tell potential clients who are in that situation that even if they get a judgment like this, the judge doesn't have a pot of gold behind his desk. So he's not going to be able to give that to you. You've got a judgment, but if the person, as you said, the person isn't collectible, you're not going to be able to do anything.